Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Puro.earth is a leading carbon removal platform for engineered carbon removals. Nasdaq acquired a majority stake in Puro.earth in 2021. Standard Chartered Bank and SEB, both long-standing supporters of the Puro.earth carbon removal ecosystem, announced an expanded partnership with Puro.earth in September. The collaboration aims to increase liquidity within the carbon dioxide removal market and boost the production of CO2 removal certificates, or CORCs, empowering corporations to achieve their carbon and net zero targets. Under the terms of the partnership, Standard Chartered Bank and SEB will act as intermediaries facilitating offtake agreements of high-quality, Puro Standard certified carbon removal credits to their clients. Today, I'm discussing the partnership with Julien Jacob, Head of Offtake and Investment Solutions at Puro.earth, Chris Leeds, Head of Carbon Market Development of Standard Chartered, and Maximilian Brodin, Head of Commodities of SEB. Gentlemen, it is great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Julien, let's kick it off with you. What are offtake agreements and why are they important for scaling the CDR market?
Thank you. Offtake agreements in our ecosystem are essentially sales contracts between a carbon project and a buyer of that carbon project's carbon credits. They are typically, those parties are typically agreeing for the future delivery of those carbon credits at an agreed price. They are essential for the carbon project because they enable to have visibility on future cash flows, which is very relevant as those projects are oftentimes fundraising and the investors want that comfort into the future cash flow generation. And they're equally important for the buyers because in what is a constrained market for high quality carbon credits, they enable the buyers to lock in future supply at what is often preferential rates.
And Julien, how does Puro's work support these offtakes?
So in the last few years, there's been an unprecedented race to innovation to remove carbon from the atmosphere and lock it durably away from the atmosphere. These activities are monetized through corporates who pay those projects to claim the benefits of those activities. And that requires for a third party, a trusted third party, to verify that the activities of the carbon projects are effectively done. And that is where Puro is involved. Puro is that third-party certifier. So before a project is built, this is when the project has to raise funds and has to lock in offtakes. There, Puro can assist by essentially assessing the compliance of that project with the rules for certification that are edicted with Puro.earth. So Puro giving basically a stamp of credibility to that project, making sure that they will be able to generate cash flows in the future through the sale of quartz. And then once the project is up and running, Puro acts as the certifier for their ongoing carbon removal activities to benefit of investors and buyers alike.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, why did you enter the partnership and why is it important to develop the support of the carbon removal market?
So thanks, Jill. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today. So Standard Chartered entered into the partnership with Nasdaq and Puro because we see that the removal market is an incredibly important place for development. There's a pretty active market for carbon avoidance and reduction projects around the world. There's a pretty good understanding that we need to reduce emissions as quickly as we can. The Paris Agreement, under the Paris Agreement, we need to reduce emissions to net zero by 2050. But that's the important word there, net. The net is the removal of carbon dioxide, and that's also what we've got to develop. Now, there are many ways that we can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and planting trees and supporting forestry is one of them. But it isn't enough. We need to go further than that. We really need to support these new projects and new technologies that will remove carbon dioxide permanently from the atmosphere, and we need to do that at scale. Now, right now, this is very expensive. Lots and lots of projects, and Puro are behind many of these for developing carbon removals, direct air capture, carbon capture and storage, enhanced rock weathering, biochar, lots of these different ways and means of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And we're seeing a lot of innovations all the time, but they're still expensive and they're still very low scale projects. And so what we want to do is get as much money as we can in now now to bring down that premium as quickly as we can. And we think that Puro and the innovations that they've been coming up with and the companies that they're working with can really do that most effectively. So we're really pleased to be working with them on this innovation together.
And Maximilian, SEB is one of the leading Northern European financial services group. How do you vision your role in the transition towards a sustainable future, and how does this partnership support that?
Thanks, Jill. Our role in the sustainability transition is to support our customers and shift our credit portfolio to more sustainable business models while reducing our fossil fuel exposure, thus reducing the amount of carbon dioxide emission we finance. So we're basically mirroring what our clients are doing. We need to cooperate with them, advise them on this journey, and we need to provide them with the tools they need to decarbonize and also reach, as Chris explained, the net zero with the hard to abate residual emissions. And in comes the partnership with Puro. It's a great toolbox that gives us access to a vast number of CDR projects. And I think for us, it's especially a good fit with the part of the Nordic ecosystem that we're seeing, with a good access to a sustainable biomass, lower than average energy costs. You can produce, for example, corks from BECCS projects, advantageous to other parts of the world, some at least. And we also have storage facilities such as the Northern Lights in the North Sea, operated by Equinor. We will have shipping of liquid CO2 molecules happening up here. So it's a good ecosystem where we know both suppliers and also the future buyers of these carbon credits, and we can work with Puro to access a good pipeline of projects. And it really comes down to activating buyers sooner rather than later in order to achieve the targets that are set out.
And Chris, Standard Chartered serves clients in 64 countries and operates in 53 countries. How is the carbon removal markets currently developing around the globe?
Well, as you rightly say, we're in many markets, but also many of those markets are emerging markets. And in fact, that's really where we see the strength of our footprint across Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And as Maximilian has just said, much of the investment so far is going into projects in the global north, in the more advanced economies. And that's because they're expensive and they're high cost. So what we want to do is try to actually bring that technology to our footprint, bring that capacity to our footprint. And when you look at countries like India and Indonesia and the Philippines, they've got vast capacity to be able to develop biochar, for example. And in many countries, there's great assets for carbon capture. So, we're going to be looking at ways in which to get funding into those projects. And again, this is really how the carbon market has worked over many years. It's about getting funding into projects that wouldn't get it otherwise. And we're passionate about that. And again, this is a great opportunity to really be able to push that capacity.
And Chris, you recently participated both in New York Climate Week and COP29, and you mentioned in the panel of New York Climate Week that achieving net zero will require substantial financial investment. COP29 was referred to also as Finance COP29. Do you think net zero is achievable, and what are the takeaways from COP29?
Yeah, I'd certainly think net zero is achievable. The question is whether it's achievable commercially at a rate that's acceptable to society. And again, I think that will happen. If you look at things like solar, wind, and batteries, they've gone from being very expensive, very non-commercial, to being very much mainstream, and that's happened over the last 20 to 30 years. What we've got to try and do is accelerate the technology that's going into carbon removals, and to get the costs down as quickly as possible. And I think it is possible. I think what we're starting to see is that interest and that innovation into projects around the world. And again, if you look at New York Climate Week versus COP, I think New York Climate Week was very much about finance and the financiers and private finance. COP was about getting finance from governments to advanced governments, to developed world governments, as they're denoted under the Paris Agreement, to developing world. But what happened at COP was it was acknowledged that we needed vast amounts of money to make the transformation, and that's why we've actually seen the financing, the definition of financing, opening up into the private markets, into other forms of finance. And the 300 billion that was agreed is a small number, really. It sounds like a big number, but we're starting to realize that we need trillions for this transformation. But then when you look at the size of the global economy, you know, the green carbon market is worth trillions of dollars already. I think it's possible. I think it will develop, and we'll start to see more money coming in, more than 300 billion that comes in through the leverage that we can see through other markets and through the different instruments that we're going to be using in the carbon markets and elsewhere. So I think it's possible, and I think it's something that we can start to see happening in the years ahead as the carbon markets really start to develop and to accelerate.
Right. So Maximilian, let's talk about it from the corporate perspective. How do you anticipate the future growth in your corporate clients' interest in achieving net zero? Are your customers getting more interested in getting to net zero?
Hopefully they are, but I mean, as explained briefly, we as a bank, we transition our credit portfolio by reducing the amount of carbon dioxide we finance. So we kind of end up working with companies that has an aligned agenda. But if we look at the regions we are the most active, I believe most of the companies have a very ambitious decarbonization journey ahead of them. If you look at the SBTi net zero commitments, for example, I think they were around 45 years ago, 40 companies, and now it's about 3,600 companies with a net zero SBTi commitment. So it's growing, and that graph looks really good, the trajectory of it as well. So it doesn't seem to be coming to an abrupt change in direction or anything anytime soon. But then, of course, what does it mean that you have a net zero target? We're still maybe 25, 30 years out in time, and what role are these companies taking today? What kind of milestones have they set, and who will actually start buying corks or other type of carbon removals at this point in time? And I think we're seeing sort of a handful, two handful maybe of companies worldwide buying significant amount of volumes currently. That's not a big number, but we're starting to see some positive signs of certain sectors coming to the market. Obviously, those with sort of low emission intensity per dollar revenue, they can afford it. They have a large scope 3 in relation to scope 1 and 2 emissions. They have exposure towards consumers. In the end, it's consumer behavior that kind of dictates the agenda here, right? This may be the only democratic agenda we have on a global scale. Consumers choose where the companies are going. And then we're seeing, for example, consumer discretionary, financials, information technology, real estate, telecom, some sectors where there's at least some early movers that they're starting to look at buying for their residual emissions already now. So we're actually quite positive when it comes to our customers. Right.
Well, Maximilian, the question is then, what's a realistic timeline for reaching net zero?
On a global level, can you say anything else than 2050, Jill? Isn't that the target we're all working towards, or should we break it down more for a specific company, perhaps? Yeah. I think okay. The not so positive truth here. If you look at actual number of projects that have been announced already in production or have announced that they will come to market, we're nowhere near to be removing enough carbon to be on track for the 2030 targets or the 2050 targets. Nowhere near. I think McKinsey says we need to scale it 3 to 10 times to be close to even the 2030 targets, and then many more times for the 2050 targets. But when things are further out in time, it's all about sort of getting that demand signal, right? Getting early buyers to come in and give revenue visibility in terms of signing these offtake agreements. That will stimulate the potential suppliers to take a final investment decision, put in the capex, put the shovel in the ground, and start building these projects. So it doesn't look very good from a supply point of view, but we still have a few years to work with the market and get the corporates to take actions as soon as possible. And then it's not out of question that we can reach the target, but we're lagging quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. And Julien, to wrap up here, Puro.earth recently hosted a panel called Commercialization Landscape during the tech event Slush in Helsinki. What are the takeaways from that panel?
Yeah. So, I mean, the takeaways from that panel, it is already a big market. There's no doubt that it's going to be a very big market. But to achieve our climate goals as dictated by the IPCC scenarios, then it needs to be a very, very, very big market. And in order to get there, there needs to be more than the current demand signal that we're seeing. So a lot of the discussions over there were about how do we get past this glass ceiling, which make a big market into this huge market that we require. A lot of things were discussed, how to involve more corporates into this. Could SBTI or other guidance also help by, for example, setting intermediary milestones for corporates? Could governments start including in their legislation objectives and essentially also create local markets to push those markets further. So those were seen very favorably by some. Other had a harder time exactly establishing whether the scale will be there. But what we're seeing as Puro on the supply side is that in the past few years, we have seen small projects becoming bigger projects, and we've seen pilots now scaling and scaling. Some examples of some of our suppliers whom we had certified for an initial pilot project, now ramping up to building 6 or more commercial facilities in just the next 12 to 24 months. So I think the supply is coming bits by bits. We hope it's going to be exponential, and that is what will get us to having the quantities necessary for that global net zero we're talking about.
All right. Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.